A little girl ran into the middle of the street, tears streaming down her face, as a gang of bikers roared past. She held out her tiny hands, begging them to stop. When they pulled over and heard her desperate words about her stepdad, what happened next left the entire neighborhood in shock. Stay with me until the end, because this story will leave you speechless. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. 8-year-old Emma had been hiding in her bedroom closet for 3 hours when she heard the motorcycles. The sound of engines roaring down Elm Street was nothing new in this rough part of town. But tonight, those engines sounded like salvation. She pressed her face against her bedroom window and watched the line of leather-clad riders cruise past her house. Her heart pounded as she made a decision that would change everything. The Thunder Ravens Motorcycle Club had been riding together for 15 years. They weren't your typical Sunday riders. These men had seen combat, survived prison, and lived through things most people couldn't imagine. Their leader, Marcus, was a former Marine with scars that told stories he never shared. Behind him rode 8 other men, each carrying their own demons and their own code of honor. They were heading back from a charity ride for wounded veterans when they saw something that made Marcus slam on his brakes. A small figure darted into the street directly in front of their convoy. The little girl's blonde hair caught the streetlight as she stumbled, nearly falling under the wheels of Marcus's Harley. Every rider stopped. Engines went silent. The only sound was the little girl's sobbing echoing through the empty street. Marcus pulled off his helmet and dismounted slowly. His massive frame cast a shadow over the child as he knelt down to her level. The other riders formed a protective circle, their eyes scanning for danger. In their world, when a child ran into traffic at 10 o'clock at night, trouble usually followed. "Hey there, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man who looked like he could bench press a car. "What's your name?" "Emma," she whispered, her small voice barely audible above the cooling motorcycle engines. "Please, you have to help me. He's going to hurt my little brother." The riders exchanged glances. They'd all been kids once. They'd all known fear, but something about this moment felt different. The desperation in Emma's voice cut through their hardened exteriors like a knife. "Who's going to hurt your brother?" asked Tommy, the club's sergeant-at-arms. His tattooed hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "I'm my stepdad," Emma said, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "He drinks the bad stuff that makes him crazy, and when Mama tries to stop him, he hurts her too. Tonight he said he was going to teach my brother a lesson he'd never forget." The temperature in the street seemed to drop 10 degrees. These weren't men who scared easily, but they all understood what those words meant. Several of them had grown up in homes where lessons came with bruises and broken bones. Marcus looked back at his brothers. In 15 years of riding together, they'd pulled each other out of bar fights, hospital beds, and worse situations than most people could imagine. But they'd never faced anything like this. They were looking at a child who had literally thrown herself into traffic because she had nowhere else to turn. "Where's your house, Emma?" Marcus asked. She pointed to a rundown 2-story home 3 doors down. Even from the street, they could hear shouting coming from inside. A man's voice, slurred with alcohol and rage, was screaming threats that made the bikers' blood run cold. Then they heard something that made their decision for them. The unmistakable sound of a child crying. Jake, the club's youngest member at 25, started walking toward the house. He'd grown up in foster care after his own father had put him in the hospital at age 6. "That's enough," he growled. "Wait!" Marcus commanded, his voice carrying the authority that had kept this club together through everything. "We do this right." But what happened next revealed just how desperate Emma really was. She grabbed Marcus's leather jacket with both hands and looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. "Please," she begged. "I don't have any money, but I'll give you everything I have. I'll clean your motorcycles. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't let him hurt my brother like he hurt me." That's when they noticed the bruises, purple fingerprints around Emma's thin wrists, a fading black eye that had been carefully covered with makeup, fresh scratches on her neck that looked suspiciously like adult fingernails. The silence that followed was the kind that comes before storms. 9 battle-hardened men stared down at a little girl who was offering to trade her childhood for her brother's safety. The weight of that moment settled over them like lead. "Emma," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. "How long has this been happening?" "Since Mama married him 2 years ago," she whispered. "He said if we ever told anyone, he'd make us disappear like he made our cat disappear. But tonight he's different, scarier, and my brother is only 5. From inside the house came a crash that sounded like furniture being thrown. A woman's scream cut through the night air, followed by the terrified crying of a small child. Emma flinched at the sound, as if she'd been physically struck. "That's my mama," she said, her voice breaking. "And that's my brother Noah. Please, I know you don't know us, but somebody has to help." The police came before, but they just talked to him for a few minutes and left. He got worse after that. Tommy stepped forward, his jaw tight with controlled fury. "Emma, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to be completely honest. Has your stepdad ever hurt you in ways that weren't just hitting?" The look of understanding that crossed Emma's young face told them everything they needed to know. Some of the riders turned away, their hands shaking with rage. Others stared at the house with expressions that promised violence. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, weighing their options. They could call the police, but Emma had just told them that had already failed. They could walk away and pretend they'd never seen her, but that wasn't who they were. Or they could do what their code demanded, protect those who couldn't protect themselves. When Marcus opened his eyes, his decision was made. He looked at his brothers, and one by one, they nodded. Whatever was about to happen, they were in it together. "Emma," Marcus said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, "you're not alone anymore, but I need you to go hide behind that car over there while we handle this. Can you do that for me?" Emma nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve. As she ran to the hiding spot, Marcus turned to face his brothers. The Thunder Ravens had just accepted a mission that would test every principle they lived by. The shouting from inside the house was getting louder, and now they could hear what sounded like a child being dragged across the floor. Marcus gestured to his brothers with a silent hand signal they all knew by heart. Within seconds, the Thunder Ravens had positioned themselves strategically around the property. These weren't random troublemakers looking for a fight. This was a precision operation executed by men who understood tactics, timing, and the weight of what they were about to do. "Remember," Marcus whispered into his radio, "we're here for the kids and the woman. Nothing more, nothing less." But as they approached the front door, the situation inside escalated beyond anything they'd expected. A window on the second floor suddenly exploded outward, glass raining down onto the front yard. Through the jagged opening, they could see a woman desperately trying to shield a small boy from a man who was swinging what looked like a baseball bat. "Now that's it," Jake snarled, breaking formation and sprinting toward the front door. The door was unlocked. Jake burst through first, followed immediately by Marcus and the others. What they found inside made their blood freeze. The living room looked like a war zone. Furniture was overturned, family photos lay shattered on the floor, and there were holes punched through the drywall that spoke of months or years of violence. But it was the scene on the staircase that stopped them cold. A woman, barely conscious and bleeding from her forehead, was crawling up the steps on her hands and knees. Above her stood a man in his 30s, holding a wooden bat and screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. And cowering behind his mother was little Noah, Emma's 5-year-old brother, his face streaked with tears and terror. "Get away from them," Marcus commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd led soldiers into combat. The stepdad spun around, and for a moment, the house went completely silent. 9 leather-clad bikers filled his living room, their presence transforming the space from a house of horrors into something else entirely. The man's alcohol-glazed eyes tried to focus on the intruders, confusion replacing rage on his face. "Who the hell are you?" he slurred, swaying on his feet but still gripping the bat. "We're your worst nightmare," Tommy replied, stepping forward. "And you're going to put that bat down right now." Instead of complying, the stepdad raised the weapon higher. "This is my house, my family. You got no right being here. Get out before I call the cops." That's when Emma's mother, Sarah, managed to lift her head. Through swollen eyes, she looked down at the bikers and whispered, "Please help us. He's going to kill us tonight. I can feel it." Her words hit the Thunder Ravens like a physical blow. These men had seen combat zones, prison riots, and street fights that would haunt most people's nightmares. But watching a broken woman beg for her children's lives in her own home awakened something primal in each of them. "Last warning," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow seemed more threatening than any shout. "Put the bat down and step away from the family." The stepdad's response was to swing the bat toward little Noah's head. He never completed that swing. Jake moved like lightning, his military training kicking in as he tackled the man before the weapon could connect with the child. The bat clattered down the stairs as both men crashed into the wall. But Jake wasn't alone. Tommy and 2 other riders were there instantly, subduing the stepdad with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of handling dangerous situations. "Check on the family," Marcus ordered, while his brothers restrained the now screaming man. "And somebody call an ambulance." But Sarah was already trying to stand, her maternal instincts overriding her injuries. "My babies," she gasped. "Are they okay? Is Emma safe?" "Emma's outside, and she's fine," Marcus assured her. "She's the bravest little girl I've ever met. She saved all of you tonight." As if summoned by his words, Emma appeared in the doorway. She took one look at the scene, her stepfather pinned to the floor and her family safe, and burst into tears of relief. She ran to her mother and brother, wrapping her thin arms around both of them. "I brought help, Mama," she sobbed, "just like I promised." The next few minutes were chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance as neighbors finally worked up the courage to call 911. The stepdad was screaming threats and promises of revenge between curses that made the bikers exchange meaningful looks. Sarah was trying to explain to the paramedics that yes, she needed medical attention, but her children came first. When the police arrived, the scene they encountered defied every expectation. 9 motorcycle club members were calmly waiting in the living room, having made no attempt to flee. The domestic abuser was zip-tied and conscious, but subdued. The family was injured, but alive and together. Detective Maria Santos had been working domestic violence cases for 12 years, but she'd never walked into anything quite like this. The lead biker, who introduced himself simply as Marcus, handed her a cell phone. "You're going to want to see what's on here," he said. The phone belonged to Sarah. On it were dozens of photos documenting months of abuse. Pictures of bruises, medical bills from emergency room visits, and most damning of all, voice recordings of the stepdad making explicit threats against the children. Evidence that would have taken investigators weeks to gather was handed over in a single moment. "How did you get this?" Detective Santos asked. "Jati, the little girl," Marcus replied. "Emma's been documenting everything, trying to protect her family the only way she knew how. She's 8 years old, and she's been building a case against this monster." As the paramedics worked on Sarah and Noah, Emma approached Marcus. She was still shaking, but there was something different about her now. The desperate terror was gone, replaced by a quiet strength that seemed impossible in someone so young. "Are you really going to make sure he can't hurt us anymore?" she asked. Marcus knelt down to her level one more time. "Emma, I want you to understand something. What you did tonight, running into that street and asking for help, that took more courage than most grown men will ever have. You saved your family. But what if he comes back? What if he gets out of jail and finds us?" The question hung in the air for a moment, before Marcus smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of expression that promised consequences for anyone foolish enough to test it. "Let me tell you something about the Thunder Ravens," Marcus said. "We take care of our own. And as of tonight, you and your family are under our protection. That means if anyone ever tries to hurt you again, they'll have to answer to all of us." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? You'd do that for us?" "Oh, sweetheart. You threw yourself in front of 9 motorcycles because you were willing to do anything to save your brother. Trust me when I tell you that we understand that kind of loyalty." As the stepdad was loaded into a police car, still shouting threats and obscenities, something extraordinary happened. Word had spread through the neighborhood about what the bikers had done. People began emerging from their homes, many of them carrying children who had clearly been woken up by the commotion. But instead of fear or hostility, the neighbors showed something unexpected: gratitude. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door approached Marcus with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "We all heard what was happening in that house, but we were too scared to get involved. You did what we should have done months ago." Old Mr. Patterson, a Vietnam veteran who lived across the street, shook each biker's hand. "You boys did good tonight," he said. "Real good." The scene that followed would become neighborhood legend. As Sarah and Noah were loaded into the ambulance, Emma insisted on riding her bicycle alongside the convoy of police cars and emergency vehicles, and flanking her on both sides, riding slowly with their engines rumbling softly, were the Thunder Ravens, ensuring she made it safely to the hospital. At the emergency room, while doctors treated Sarah and Noah, Emma sat in the waiting room surrounded by 9 leather-clad guardians. She'd fallen asleep against Marcus's shoulder when Detective Santos returned with news that would change everything. "The district attorney wants to meet with you," she told Marcus. "What you all did tonight, the way you handled this situation, it's going to be studied in police academies. You potentially saved 3 lives while gathering enough evidence to put that man away for a very long time." Marcus looked down at the sleeping child against his shoulder. "We just did what anyone should have done." "No," Detective Santos corrected him. "You did what everyone should have done, but only you were brave enough to actually do it." The next morning brought news that would test the Thunder Ravens in ways they never expected. Detective Santos called Marcus at 6 a.m. with information that made his blood run cold. "We've got a problem," she said without preamble. "The stepdad made bail. His brother put up the money, and he walked out 2 hours ago." Marcus sat up in bed, instantly awake. "How is that possible? With all the evidence we gave you?" His lawyer argued flight risk was minimal because of community ties. The judge set bail at $50,000. "We fought it, but the system has loopholes, and this guy's brother apparently has money. Where is he now?" "That's the thing. He's not at his brother's house. He's not at any of the usual places. Marcus, this man made specific threats against Emma and her family before he left the jail. He told the other inmates exactly what he planned to do to the little girl who caused all his trouble." Marcus was already reaching for his clothes. "Where's the family now?" "Safe house, but it's temporary. We can only hold them there for 72 hours max. After that, they're on their own unless we can file additional charges." 20 minutes later, the Thunder Ravens were assembled at their clubhouse, a converted garage on the outskirts of town. The mood was darker than Marcus had seen in years. These men had signed up to protect Emma and her family, but now they were facing a predator who knew how to work the system. "So what's the plan, boss?" Jake asked, pacing like a caged animal. "We can't just let this psychopath hunt down that little girl. The cops are doing everything they can," Marcus replied, but his voice carried doubt. "Problem is, until he actually does something, their hands are tied." Tommy slammed his fist on the table. "So we wait until he hurts Emma? That's not happening. Not on my watch." "Nobody's waiting for anything," Marcus said firmly, "but we're going to be smart about this. We're not vigilantes. We're protectors." That's when Diesel, the club's intelligence specialist and former military police, spoke up. "I've been doing some digging on this Steve character, the stepdad. Turns out he's got a history that makes last night look like a warm-up. Every head turned toward Diesel. In his 50s with gray streaking through his beard, Diesel had a reputation for finding information that others missed. If he said he'd been digging, it meant he'd uncovered something significant. Duties, 3 different states, 5 different families. Diesel continued, consulting his laptop. This piece of garbage has been moving around, marrying single mothers, abusing their kids, then disappearing when things get too hot. Sarah and Emma weren't his first victims. They were just his most recent. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus felt his hands clench involuntarily. How many kids? At least 12 that I can confirm. Ages ranging from 4 to 14. He's got a type. Single mothers with young children. Women who are vulnerable and isolated. He gains their trust, moves in, then starts the control cycle. When the heat gets too intense, he vanishes. Jake's voice was barely controlled. Where are the other families now? That's the thing. 2 of the mothers disappeared entirely. Never filed charges, never spoke to police again. One moved across the country and changed her name. The others are too scared to testify. This guy has perfected terrorizing families into silence. Marcus stood up slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. But Emma broke the pattern. She fought back. Exactly. And that makes her the most dangerous witness he's ever faced. She documented everything. She wasn't afraid to get help, and now she has us backing her up. In his twisted mind, she represents everything that could destroy his entire operation. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Emma wasn't just another victim to Steve. She was an existential threat to his way of life. He wouldn't just disappear this time. He'd eliminate the threat first. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. His blood turned to ice as he read the words aloud. Tell the little girl I'm coming for her. And tell her biker friends they can't protect her forever. How did he get your number? Tommy demanded. Doesn't matter, Marcus replied, already moving toward his motorcycle gear. What matters is he just made this personal. But before anyone could respond, Marcus's phone rang. Detective Santos again. We've got another problem, she said. Steve's brother just filed a restraining order against your club, claims you threatened his family and damaged his property. It's bogus, but until we can get it thrown out, you're legally required to stay away from anything connected to Steve or his relatives. You've got to be kidding me. Gets worse. Steve's lawyer is claiming last night was an illegal home invasion. He's pushing for charges against all of you. Marcus looked around at his brothers, seeing the same grim understanding in their eyes. The system they'd tried to work within was being turned against them. While they played by the rules, Steve was rewriting them. Detective, I need you to be straight with me. If something happens to Emma, if this monster gets to her while we're tied up in legal red tape, will the system take responsibility for that? The pause on the other end of the line told him everything he needed to know. Marcus, I'm trying everything I can, but nothing. This isn't about legal procedures anymore. This is about a little girl who trusted us to keep her safe. After hanging up, Marcus faced his brothers. 9 men who had served their country, survived wars, and lived by a code that put loyalty above everything else. Now that code was being tested in the most fundamental way possible. We all know what this means, Marcus said quietly. If we move forward, we're going outside the law. There's no coming back from that. Anyone who wants out, speak now. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence was their answer. All right then, Diesel, I need everything you can find on Steve's brother, his properties, his finances, his habits. Tommy, reach out to our contacts in the police department, the ones who actually give a damn about justice. Jake, I want surveillance on every location Steve might show up. What about the family? Jake asked. They stay in protection, but we're adding our own security. Shifts start now, and they don't end until this is over. That afternoon, while Emma played with coloring books in the safe house, completely unaware of the storm gathering around her, The Thunder Ravens began the most important mission of their lives. They weren't just protecting a child anymore. They were standing between innocence and evil in its purest form. Sarah, still recovering from her injuries, pulled Marcus aside during one of his visits. "I keep thinking about what Emma told me," she said softly. "She said she prayed for angels to save us, and then you appeared. Maybe that sounds crazy, but..." "Doesn't sound crazy at all," Marcus interrupted. "Sometimes angels wear leather jackets, but I'm scared. What if you can't stop him? What if he finds us despite everything you're doing?" Marcus looked through the window at Emma, who was teaching little Noah how to draw motorcycles. The sight of her laughing, finally acting like the child she should have been all along, strengthened his resolve. "Sarah, I've been in combat zones where the enemy had better weapons, more men, and every advantage you could imagine. But they had one weakness. They were fighting for the wrong reasons. Steve might think he's hunting us, but he's wrong. We're hunting him, and we're fighting for something worth dying for." That night, as darkness settled over the city, Steve made his first move. Security cameras at a gas station 3 miles from the safe house captured footage of him asking the clerk about motorcycle clubs in the area. He was methodical, patient, getting closer to his target. But he'd made one critical error. He assumed the Thunder Ravens were just another gang, driven by ego and violence. He didn't understand that they were something far more dangerous. Protectors with nothing left to lose. The hunt was about to begin, and only one side would survive it. The next morning brought a breakthrough that nobody saw coming. Diesel burst into the clubhouse at dawn, his laptop clutched under his arm and excitement burning in his eyes. The other Thunder Ravens were already there, having slept in shifts to maintain constant communication with their surveillance teams. "I found him," Diesel announced, slamming his computer down on the table. "Steve's holed up in a storage facility on the south side. But here's the kicker. He's not alone." The screen displayed grainy security footage from a nearby traffic camera. Steve's truck was parked outside a row of storage units, but there were 2 other vehicles Marcus didn't recognize. "His brother brought reinforcements," Diesel continued. 3 guys, all with records for assault and worse. They're planning something big." Tommy leaned closer to the screen. "What kind of something big? I remember those other families I mentioned? The ones who disappeared or went silent?" I tracked down one of the mothers. She agreed to talk, but only after I promised her complete anonymity. Diesel pulled up a phone recording, the woman's voice disguised and shaking with fear. "He doesn't just move on when families resist," the voice said. "He eliminates the problem. Permanently. My daughter tried to fight back once. Tried to tell a teacher what was happening. Steve made sure she never got the chance to tell anyone else." The implication hit the room like a physical blow. Marcus felt his jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. He's planning to kill Emma. Not just Emma, the whole family. He's done it before. Made it look like accidents or disappearances. This time, he's bringing enough firepower to handle anyone who gets in his way. Jake was already reaching for his jacket. "Then we end this now. Tonight." "Wait," Marcus commanded, but his voice carried less authority than usual. The revelation that Steve was a serial killer who targeted children had shaken even him. "We need a plan that doesn't get us all arrested or killed." "Nah, boss. With respect, planning time just ran out." Diesel turned his laptop screen toward Marcus. "I intercepted communications from their group. They're moving tonight. Soon as the sun goes down, they're hitting the safe house." The safe house, where Emma was probably coloring pictures right now, believing she was finally safe. Where Sarah was trying to heal from her injuries while protecting little Noah. Where police protection consisted of 2 officers who had no idea what kind of evil was heading their way. Marcus's phone rang. "Detective Santos." "We've got a situation," she said before he could speak. "The safe house has been compromised. Someone leaked the location, and we're moving the family to a new facility. But Marcus, the transport isn't until midnight, and we just lost radio contact with one of our patrol units. The patrol unit that was supposed to be watching Steve." "How did you know that?" Marcus looked at his brothers. seeing his own grim realization reflected in their faces. Because he's already making his move. Detective, you need to get that family out of there right now. I'm trying, but the new safe house isn't ready, and we don't have the manpower to provide adequate protection during transport. The department's stretched thin tonight. That's when Marcus made the decision that would define the Thunder Ravens forever. Then we'll provide the protection. Marcus, you can't. The restraining order, the legal complications. Forget the legal complications. This isn't about us anymore. This is about Emma. As he hung up, Marcus turned to face his brothers. 9 men who had followed him through everything, who trusted his judgment even when it led them into danger. Now he was asking them to risk not just their freedom, but potentially their lives. You all heard the situation. Steve and his crew are moving tonight. The police can't protect Emma's family, and we're the only thing standing between that little girl and a monster who's killed before. What's the plan, boss? Tommy asked. We're going to do what we should have done from the beginning. We're going to end this. The Thunder Ravens spent the next 2 hours preparing for war. Not the kind of bar fight or territory dispute they'd handled before, but actual combat against armed killers who had nothing to lose. They checked weapons, planned routes, and established communication protocols with the precision of the military units several of them had served in. But it was Emma herself who changed everything. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When he opened it, his blood turned to ice. It was a photo of Emma, taken through the safe house window. She was sitting at a kitchen table, completely unaware that someone was watching her from outside. The message below the photo read, "She's prettier than the others. I'm going to take my time with this one." What happened next became legend in law enforcement circles across 3 states. Within 6 hours, Steve and his crew were in federal custody, facing charges that would put them away forever. The evidence Emma had been collecting for 2 years, combined with testimony from other survivors Diesel had tracked down, built a case so airtight that Steve's lawyer advised him to take a plea deal. Emma's courage that night didn't just save her family, it saved 12 other children whose cases had gone cold. The Thunder Ravens proved that sometimes the most unlikely heroes wear leather jackets and ride motorcycles. They showed an 8-year-old girl that when you're brave enough to ask for help, real protectors will always answer the call. 5 years later, Emma still visits Marcus every Sunday. She's 13 now, excelling in school, and dreams of becoming a police detective. The Thunder Ravens still patrol that neighborhood, and everyone knows that some guardian angels prefer Harleys to wings. Sometimes the most dangerous-looking men make the best protectors, because they understand that true strength means fighting for those who can't fight for themselves.